Well, you know, when you hear my theme music, you're in the room on TAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel and a global reach. And I want to welcome everybody to TAN TV, the African American Network. I'm your host, Vance Bradford, along with my co-host, Mr. Philip Townsend. And our goal at TAN TV is to discuss topics that impact the community at large, also to educate and enlighten our viewing audience. Today's segment of In the Room is Dr. B's Buzz. And now we're pleased to have Dr. Brigitte Bailey, who will endeavor to further your understanding and knowledge of psychiatry and mental health. Dr. Bailey is a professor of psychiatry at UT San Antonio and the training director of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Residency Program. Dr. Bailey is also board certified in child and adolescent psychiatry and adult psychiatry. This is my favorite line right here. Dr. B's Buzz is a brief segment, but you know, we have so much information. Brief is just, you know, is relevant, you know, is what you make it brief. All right. But on mental health and related topics, man, we have fun here at Dr. B's Buzz.
Yeah, Vance, you know, the last show that we had was on suicide, and there was so much information to cover that there was no way we could get it in one segment. So the last show was on suicide. This time it's suicide. The talk continues. But before we get started, we have to start off with Dr. Bailey's breathing exercise. Now, what I'm hoping for, Vance, is because I'm wearing a lighter shirt today, that people will actually get a chance to see some movement. So no one can accuse me of not breathing properly.
Brother, you got to inhale. You got to bring it in. That's the problem. You got to bring it in. All right.
Okay. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah. You know, they already know I bring it in.
Yeah.
All right. All right, you guys. So here's our deep breathing. Remember, we want to breathe where our tummies rise and not just the lung part. So we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose, and then we're going to exhale it through our mouth. You ready? All right. Deep breath in. Hold it. Hold it, hold it. Slowly release through your mouth. Deep breath in. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Let it out. One more deep breath in. Hold it, hold it, hold it, and let it out. All right, how'd you feel, Phil?
Oh, well, there's no doubt about it. You didn't need a magic show for that. I'm sure that, you know, you had to see me moving. If you could not see anything moving on me then, look, believe it or not, I know this great ophthalmologist and a couple of optometrists that may be able to help.
Yeah, I saw ribs. I even counted a few ribs, bro. You inhaled.
Okay.
Wow. Well, Dr. Bailey, you know, I do nothing different than every show. I started with that intense question, so I hope you're ready and massage your temples and everything. Okay. Do you have to have a mental illness? You know, I thought about this, you know, do you have to have a mental illness to commit suicide?
All right. So I'm gonna go back just a little bit before I answer your question and remind the audience that we are talking about suicide today because it is the second leading cause of death for the ages of 10 years old all the way up to 34. So that's why we brought this issue into being, is for one, because we don't really think about it, that out of all the things that can kill folks from that young age, it is suicide as a second leading cause. And to answer your question, it's not necessarily that you have a mental illness to commit suicide. One, there can be other issues that are involved, and there's other people that have mental illnesses that don't have thoughts about killing themselves. So not necessarily do you need one to have to commit suicide, and especially if you do it on an impulse, meaning that it's just something that happened for the moment, the thought popped in your head, and you had easy access to a lethal means of killing yourself at that point in time.
Dr. Bailey, excuse me, Vance, okay, so Dr. Bailey, you're saying that, and giving just an example would be like, for instance, someone seeing their boyfriend or girlfriend out with another, person or something, and not being able to control their impulses at that time. They go and do something like committing suicide. So that wouldn't necessarily be an underlying mental health issue, just something that, would become more spontaneous.
Yeah, more spontaneous, a thought at the moment, and actually access to carry out your thought before you had time to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Phil, thanks for bringing that situation up, because that led me to think about the depression. So, Dr. Bailey, do you have to be depressed to commit suicide?
It's one of the main reasons that people kill themselves. But again, you could have other things, other causes for wanting you to kill yourself. So it's not always being depressed. You can have a number of other mental health issues going on, but other times there can just be life circumstances and situations. So it doesn't logically sound that way, right? Because you think everyone who makes that step and takes the step to kill themselves, that they need to be depressed to feel that way, but it's just not necessarily always the case.
So, Dr. Bailey, are there other risk factors that, that for committing suicide?
Yeah, there's another one that you might hear is the chronic severe pain, where the pain is just unbearable. And they've tried many things. You might hear about sometimes people kill themselves because they can't stand the pain any longer. But people sometimes get diagnosed with serious physical illnesses. Others have made decisions when they get older in age that if they can no longer care for themselves or be independent, that's their time, that they're going to make that decision and that step to take control and kill themselves. So make that decisions early, but when the time comes, they don't do it. Drugs and alcohol. So if you're under the influence, sometimes that's a contributing factor for suicide. You think about others, sometimes finances, right? Severe financial changes that you didn't account for, or that somehow it impacts your life enough that you feel that there's no other way out. If there's a family history of suicide, that's one of the risk factors for other people in your family for making that next step. And then if you've had previous suicide attempts, that puts you at risk. And then again, going back to if you're being rejected, right? So a breakup with a girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, being rejected, or the feeling of being rejected by someone else. So those are all other risk factors, and there are plenty more, but those tend to be some of the main ones.
Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Bailey, we all often sometimes seem to think that we really know people, and especially sometimes when we get into the, thinking the intimate thoughts that people have. And you mentioned about the pain and all going, but what do you say to the person who asks, what could I have done to prevent this suicide?
Yeah, it's always, I think people and family members, friends think that sometimes that you can prevent suicide, but one thing to say to them is that it really isn't their fault. Sometimes people who make decisions to take that next step are good at keeping it to themselves and don't give you any indication that that's something that they're planning on doing. And especially if they plan it to the point where there's no chance of someone finding them or interrupting their attempt. And so, again, making sure it's not their fault and understanding that you are the only person that you can control. You really can't control what other people are doing, what they're thinking. And that includes parents. You know, we think we control all our kids, but we only control them to a certain extent. And so you can only control yourself. And sometimes there isn't anything that you could have done to prevent it. But know that it's not your fault. We may still feel that way, but there isn't anything that you could have done.
Okay.
Wow. Well, Dr. Bailey, I was, you find yourself in certain situations, like say, like in death, and you find yourself, knowing what to say, to a person as an adult. When death comes, you find yourself maybe not knowing what to say. But really, for me, is what do you tell a child that feels that it's their fault for a parent that committed suicide?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. So what, if a child is talking to you and you're hearing that or they're saying that to you, one, sit down and listen to them. Ask them why they think it's their fault. So depending on their age and their development, they might say, well, my parent, they were always telling me to pick up my toys and I didn't. I said something mean to them. I told them I didn't love them. Or if they're teenagers or a little older, they might have had a fight with that parent before the parent committed suicide. And so they're thinking that by those actions of theirs that they caused something. So you want to have an idea of why they think that is so you can reassure them. But then you also tell them that it isn't their fault. They're not to blame. And you say that sometimes parents make decisions that we don't always understand, but that doesn't mean we caused what they did. And that we are here, reassure them that we are here for them. And you're there to listen to them and just keep repeating that it isn't their fault. Because that's just sometimes kids take a lot of responsibilities of what adults do, whether they should or not. And so just being there for them and keep repeating the same things that you have and just reassuring them that it isn't their fault. And sometimes we don't always understand what other people's decisions are, what makes them do things, but we're here for you.
Okay, Dr. Bailey, I have a two-part question for you. I'm not sure you've given so much information. I'm not sure if you haven't already answered this, what I'm going to ask. And I'm not even sure if you can separate the question that I'm going to ask you, but I have a key point here is how can you recognize possible suicidal tendencies with the emphasis on recognize?
So we don't always know what people are going through. And some people, if they're going through things, they may not easily share with their loved ones or with their friends. So for us, it's always be a little bit more observant. When you notice changes in behaviors, listen to what they're actually saying. So we're always trying to multitask, right? We're talking to someone, we might be working on the computer or on our phone. We're doing multiple things while trying to listen to people. But sometimes go with that gut feeling. If there's something that doesn't sound right, doesn't look right, stop and listen to what the person is saying to you and hear what they're saying. Sometimes if it might start saying, hey, I've noticed that, you haven't been around much, or that you're looking kind of down, or you're not in your usual happy mood, what's going on? I'm here for you. Because sometimes just opening up that conversation and showing that you've been observant and that you've noticed changes, sometimes that may be enough to get them to talk to you to say, hey, what's really been going on, or that they know that you are available for them.
Okay, Dr. Bailey, so in asking kind of like what's going on, so what should people look for?
The things you want to definitely look for. So obvious things are, if people start writing about death, putting it in the social media, talking about death or dying, or even sometimes for teenagers, they may jokingly bring up the discussion about suicide, or, I might have some thoughts about killing myself, and then I'm just joking, or psych, blowing it off. But listen to what they have to say. Most people are not going to joke about taking their lives, and that might be their chance that they're giving you to say, hey, I'm hurting inside, please listen to me, but, I'm not going to tell you straight up unless, I think that you're going to hear me and not dismiss what I'm saying or not acknowledge what I'm saying. Other things are, you might hear people say I'm a burden. Or you don't have to worry about me, I'm not going to be around much longer. People giving away their things. Kids give away their toys or their favorite things for no reason. If you notice that people are contacting their family members that they haven't talked to in a long time, going to visit people they haven't seen, that might be other clues. You might also think about, especially older folks, where they might not want to be a burden for their kids, or I don't want to be a problem anymore for you guys. Those are things to watch for, but definitely if they are staying home for kids, staying in their rooms, not coming out, they're not enjoying all the things that they like to do, especially if kids are not on their social media playing their video games, there's definitely something going on. And so just take a look around you and start acknowledging and observing what our kids are doing, what our family members are doing, what our friends are doing, especially in this time of COVID-19 when we're all, social distancing, not going places, we're not visiting our relatives. And there's a lot of stress going on in people's household. And sometimes they might feel like that's just, they can't take it anymore. So just look for changes that are not usual for that person. In kids, it might be a definite change in what they wear or what their appearance is. If, kids, adults, wear makeup and they're not wearing makeup, not taking the time to dress like they normally do, those are all changes that if we're paying attention, they're out there for us to look for.
Okay, Dr. Bailey, suicide may seem like a singular or an individual act, but it casts a wide shadow. Could you talk about the psychological and physical effects on family members' health?
Now let's kind of start with the physical effects. So, immediately, you might have shortness of breath, stomach aches, headaches, feeling nauseous all the time, even, vomiting, throwing up can happen. But when you think about the long-term effects or the stress of dealing with someone, who's killed themselves, then, we talked about stress before, where it increases one of our, hormone levels, cortisol. And that can, long-term, can cause problems like hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes. Then you also think of diverticulitis, which is a disease of your intestines. So you can actually develop a lot of physical things. You might find yourself even going to the doctor more often for various aches and pains, after the fact. So the physical things can occur. And then you asked about the psychological things. So when we think about psychological things, those are where, how you're feeling. And so if you discover the person who's killed themselves, then you think about all the trauma, and then you might end up with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, the depression that can set in sometimes, anxiety. You can also have panic attacks. Just find yourself thinking about it and just suddenly panicking, where you feel like, you know, you're about to die, your heart's beating faster, you're breathing fast, or you can't feel like you're catching your breath. Those are things that can occur for the psychological impact. And then especially if you're a parent, right, that you have that feeling that you failed to protect your child or keep your child safe, even though you might not have had an inkling or a clue of what was going on. But that's a hard thing for parents to have to deal with, is when their child commits suicide. So they might feel that they're a failure, which then again could lead to depression. So depression is one of the main reasons why people kill themselves. But, you know, after someone commits suicide, family members can end up being in the hospital because they're having thoughts about killing themselves, or not wanting to live without their loved one, or just feeling all the guilt that you might feel.
Wow. Wow. So I see, which did, you know, you just talked about the psychological and physical effects. So Dr. Bailey, can you tell me what is the emotional impact on families of people that have, you know, attempted suicide?
So a lot of times you can have people could be right after, you know, someone comes home after that, you know, they've survived a suicide attempt. People can feel very mad at their family members, very angry that they tried to kill themselves. But you also, because of the stigma of suicide, the stigma of mental illness in and of itself, you might feel deep shame of what's happened. So, you know, people are going to ask you, hey, your kid or your adult child or a family member were in the hospital. What were they in the hospital for, right? That's one of the normal questions we ask, because we want to make sure they're okay, but we're also curious. And if you're thinking about and feeling shamed about, because this person, your family member, tried to kill themselves, sometimes that's not easy to say to your friends or other family members who are inquiring. So that deep sense of shame, or you might feel guilt for it, or you might be that when they come home, you're scared to even talk about it with that person because you think that might trigger another suicide attempt. And so you're unsure about what you need to do to have that conversation in order to help them. But you might even feel betrayed because they didn't come to you in confidence, and you know, you thought that you guys were pretty close, and they didn't tell you that they were feeling that bad. So you can have a number of feelings, and I think one of the worst feelings you have is that you're feeling kind of helpless, right? That things are out of your control. You don't even know what to do to help them in the next stage of getting better and healing before they try to kill themselves again. There's just a number of emotional feelings that can occur just on your family member, your child, your spouse, making that attempt to kill themselves.
Wow. Okay. I can see the impact on families now. My follow-up question was sticking with these emotions. So can you tell me how should someone feel if a friend or loved one, you know, commits suicide?
So everyone's going to be different about how they feel. And there is no right way to feel, and there's no wrong way to feel.
Let me just say that UT Health San Antonio is in no way affiliated or associated with the views expressed by Dr. Bailey, TAN TV, the African American Network, or any participants of this show. I want to thank you for watching TAN TV, from Dr. Bailey, from Vance, and myself. Thanks for watching the African American Network. And remember, you've been stung by Dr. B's buzz.
Dr. Bailey.
There you go.
You know how we go out with this one now.